And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment of Cowboy State Politics Live. From very high above, all the puerile and insipid, bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State. Oh, no. See, I am still not really ready to be down in the middle swamp. But I'm broadcasting to you from the depths of the middle swamp in Wyoming's capital of Cheyenne. See, you get so used to being in your own studio, and man, the prospect of going and staying in the swamp for 2 months sometimes is almost unavoidable. But that's right, my friends. I am in the middle swamp in Wyoming's capital of Cheyenne. And already, even though it is only day 5, well, today will be day 5 of the Wyoming legislative session, there's been a ton of stuff that's been happening. And true to their word, the Freedom Caucus, the leadership in the Wyoming House, has been pushing out pieces and parts of their 5 and dime plan. And I'm going to get to a bunch of those today. There was some great sound bites coming from the House of Representatives yesterday, and it became very clear where some people stood politically. And keep in mind, the vast majority of people in the Wyoming House claim to be Republicans, but when it comes down to it, most of them really aren't. And we know this. This is Wyoming. I mean, it's if you're a Democrat, it's very difficult to get elected here, which is why most people claim to be Republicans. And, you know, I guess if you are a goal-oriented person and you believe that the ends justify the means, then it's okay to lie to your constituents, which apparently is exactly what happened in the case of a couple of these representatives. Now, the two that I'm referring to are my pal. Maybe it's a frenemy now, I'm not sure, but Julie Jarvis and Alyssa Campbell. They said some amazing things at the microphone, and we're going to get to those during the course of today's broadcast. I've also got a ton of other sound bites, a trip down memory lane with Joe Biden and Jim Acosta, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that has happened today. But it is Cowboy State Politics, and it's Open Line Friday. That's right, my friends. Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics Live. This is the day where we can talk about whatever you want to talk about, regardless what I've prepared, what I've spent hours and hours and hours of my time preparing for you. We can toss it all out the window if you like, and we'll just talk about whatever you want to talk about. The rules are different here on Open Line Friday than they are during the rest of the week. During the week, if you call in, you kind of have to talk about what I want to talk about. I mean, it's my show, and if you want to be a part of it, you kind of have to play by my rules. This is a Dave-tatorship here at Cowboy State Politics Live. But on Fridays, it's Open Line Friday, and we'll throw all those rules out the window and just talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. So if you want to be part of the program, the phone number here in the studio, in the mobile studio, is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. If you're watching on the Ditto Cam, you can find the phone number to the studio right, I guess it's right over here. But it's 307-374-8989, open line Friday on Cowboy State Politics. We begin this morning with pretty much where the House left off yesterday. Yesterday was the first committee of the whole. And, it's, and maybe I should explain the process to you. Each bill gets 3 readings after it comes out of committee. And the first one is called Committee of the Whole. And it's, they debate the bill, and there's probably some amendments that happen, but it's less structured than the rest of the debate. Then if a bill passes committee of the whole, then it goes to second reading. Second reading usually is pretty perfunctory. And then third reading is the bill is debated again, and you can offer more amendments. And if it passes third reading, then it heads over to the other chamber, to the Senate, to see what the Wyoming caucus is going to do with it. So anyway, yesterday was the first day of Committee of the Whole in the House of Representatives, and there was quite a bit of fireworks, actually. A couple of the main bills that came up was the DEI bill. There was the What is a Woman Act, which that one had quite a bit of debate on it. That's the one I was referring to at the show open, where it became very clear who is in what camp and if they're really a Republican or not. And the vote on the What is a Woman Act was 50 in favor of it and 12 against it. I can't remember if it was actually 12, but that would be the remaining number of representatives in the House of Representatives. So that was a big one. And then the DEI bill. And that's where I want to start today's broadcast, is with the banning of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But we're going to start at the national level from Breitbart. From the Federalist. Expect more disasters from Democrats and liberal Republicans who replace competence with DEI credentials. Now, this has been a problem throughout the Biden administration, throughout the last 4 years, maybe more, because I'm sure this whole DEI stuff started into at the latter end of the Trump administration, certainly with Nicole Hannah-Jones, I think that's her name, and the 1619 Project, the fraudulent history lesson put out by the New York Times. It's been thoroughly discredited, by the way. The country did not begin in 1619. It's not based on racism, and it's certainly not based on anything that comes out of the New York Times. But from the Federalist, and I quote, "For more than a week now, residents in Southern California, like the author, who is Kit Bobko, have been on the receiving end of texts and calls from friends and relatives confirming that we were out of harm's way from the fires ravaging Los Angeles County. I received, let's see here, and maybe we won't go through this whole thing. I only read a little bit of the tail end of it. Here we go. This is the part that I wanted to bring to you. First, ideology is not leadership. And leadership is not fungible. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass demonstrated within hours her unfitness to deal with the calamity unfolding on her watch. California, a Democrat Party-controlled state where no Republican holds statewide office, is that government positions are filled by far-left firsts pledged to be the progressive agenda in a one-party California. And it is more important that an individual with desired traits and ideology holds a position of power than their ability to actually do it. And if you look at the fire chief in LA County, though I have way more respect for her than I do Karen Bass, she was very clear in one of the first videos I saw of this person. Well, I'm the first lesbian fire chief in California, and I really focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and the LGBTQ agenda. Well, she's kind of changed her tune now that she doesn't have any water in fire hydrants, and fires are burning pretty much all of Los Angeles. Now it comes down to brass taxes and what you actually have to do. It's your job, right? So anyway, what you get with diversity, equity, and inclusion, at least its current iteration, is people that are not qualified to do a position, and they were only hired to check a box, that they were only hired because they're gay, or because they're black, or because they're Hispanic, or because they're all of the above, or, in the case of Karine Jean-Pierre, if you watched any of the White House press briefings, it became very clear that Karine Jean-Pierre was not good at her job at all. Pretty much all the time, she read from her giant binder, but she made it clear that she was the first LGBTQ African-American woman to hold that position. That's why she was hired in the first place, to check a box. But just because you're in possession of immutable characteristics like being black or being a woman or being gay or whatever, fill in the blank, whatever you like, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're qualified to do a job. You certainly wouldn't hire an engineer to design a bridge that had no engineering background but only filled a box. You wouldn't get on a plane just because a pilot was hired because they were black but didn't go to flight school. This is how ridiculous this situation is becoming. And states, counties, and companies have been engaging in diversity, equity, and inclusion for some time to the absolute detriment of their citizens. And we need to look no further than Los Angeles. I had concerns early on that the fire was going to burn all of Los Angeles and Hollywood. In some respects, fire gives rebirth. There are many trees in Wyoming that they don't sprout new seedlings unless a fire comes through. A lot of pine trees are like that. But if you've ever looked at, a year after a fire went through a section of the forest in Wyoming, you can tell that there's a rebirth that's happening. You'll see all sorts of plants and trees and all sorts of things crop up where the fire went through. And in some respects, I think that may have been what was necessary in Hollywood. But the scare that they were given perhaps was enough to say that maybe a diversity hire is not the best way to go in choosing a mayor. We'll see. But we've also seen some of that in Wyoming. And it's, I don't know that it's definitely not to the degree of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, or that idiot fire chief in Los Angeles. But there has been a lot of discussions of DEI. Recently, the University of Wyoming said they were closing their Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Multicultural Affairs. Those are the two culprits. You remember way back on the podcast when I did an investigation into a drag training that took place at the University of Wyoming? Well, yeah, they were training drag queens, and all of it was paid for by Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And interestingly enough, those two departments together, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and Multicultural Affairs, if I remember correctly, their budget was $1.7 million. $1.7 million they had spent just to make sure that they were checking all of the right boxes. Well, now there's a bill in the House that is going to eliminate DEI. From the turkey vulture, the Freedom Caucus anti-DEI bill flies through the House committee. And I quote, "The third item of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus 5 and Dime plan is moving forward after a bill prohibiting DEI practices in state institutions passed unanimously Wednesday in the House Education Committee and on first reading in the full House on Thursday. House Bill 147, Prohibition of Institutional Discrimination, is sponsored by Freedom Caucus Chairwoman Rachel Rodriguez Williams. As she put it, it restores state government to a colorblind approach, which is the only approach that we should have. I talked about this yesterday on the broadcast, that the Wyoming Constitution is very clear that all members of the human race are equal. And that means without distinction of your race, your sex, your creed, whatever the case may be, all members of the human race are equal. We don't judge people on immutable characteristics here, and we shouldn't anywhere. Because just because you happen to be a woman or you happen to be black or you happen to be a man, that says nothing about your qualifications. And I quote, "The Biden administration sold DEI, known as Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, as a benign way to address inequalities," Representative Rachel Rodriguez Williams said. But the words for which these letters stand have been twisted beyond all recognition to now mean the exact opposite of what most Americans and Wyomingites believe are meant by diversity, equity, and inclusion. The bill defines DEI, quote, "as any program, activity, or policy that promotes differential or preferential treatment of individuals or classifies individuals on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, ethnicity, or national origin." It applies to the University of Wyoming, public community colleges and school districts, as well as local governments and political subdivisions or corporations within this state. And it is absolutely necessary. Now, while I don't think that we've seen municipalities, cities, or portions of state government run rampant with DEI, we have seen this crop up at the University of Wyoming. Remember, it was not that long ago that president of UW, Ed Seidel, that guy, and by the way, if you missed the video of when I confronted him, it's available on my YouTube channel. You're going to have to look way back in there, but it's there. He set up basically the free speech police, and he encouraged the university to report anybody who made you feel uncomfortable. DEI at one point was in full swing at the University of Wyoming. Well, if this bill passes, which it will definitely pass the House of Representatives, and it may pass the Senate, who knows what's going to happen where the Wyoming caucus is in charge. But it's absolutely necessary. So during the course of the committee debate, Representative Tom Kelly, good friend of mine, asked a question of Rachel Rodriguez Williams. Here is what he asked the good representative.
I've talked to constituents about this, and I've heard some concerns. So I'd like to ask, does this any way prohibit educational facilities, colleges, public schools, which are government entities, from even discussing these issues? Would people not be able to talk about the concept of institutional racism and have an open discussion for it? Or is this prohibiting the state from promoting that ideology without discussion on it? Can you differentiate and clarify that, please?
Chairwoman Rodriguez Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Kelly, thank you for your question. Essentially, what this bill does in Section 1 is it prohibits practices of state institutions. Obviously, we don't want to prohibit any freedom of speech of any individual.
So the bill prohibits practicing DEI, not discussing DEI. It would certainly be a travesty if teachers were not allowed to talk about the concept of institutional racism, which, by the way, does not exist in Wyoming. We haven't institutionalized racism in the Constitution, in the Declaration of Independence, or in any other founding document. The concept of institutional racism is ridiculous. On face. Are there racists in this country? Sure, there are racists everywhere, but it is not institutionalized. It is not structural, which is the false premise that DEI is based on. That we do have the whole premise behind it is that we have a system of institutional racism, and for that we have to, make adjustments. We have to use DEI. That's the whole genesis of this DEI movement. But I think that Tom Kelly's question is prescient, in that we have to make sure that we can discuss these concepts and debunk them. And the bill doesn't prevent anybody from discussing DEI or any of that. So anyway, that was the first bill. It sailed through the House of Representatives on committee of the whole. And there really wasn't a whole heck of a lot of debate. Pretty much everybody was in favor of it. I don't remember the debate on it. Let's see here. The article doesn't mention the vote on the floor. But in any case, this is something that I think every legislature needs to handle, and I'm glad they're doing it. Well, it's anyway, we're way past our first break, but it's Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics Live. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number here is 307-374-8989. When we come back, we're going to briefly talk about some national politics and what Speaker of the U.S. House Mike Johnson is doing with a committee chairman. He removed one because they were a deep state, Ukraine-loving, institutional a plant. I don't know which plant, but we'll do that after the break. So take a listen to some of our sponsors, and then when we come back, we'll continue with the broadcast. There's lots more to come on Cowboy State Politics Live. Let's get a word in from our sponsors. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a better source of news, information, and entertainment than right here on the Independence Network. Now, we're making a few changes, moving a couple things around, out with the old and in with the new, and that whole spiel. Of course, you could listen to my program, The Ramble Room with Ken Pendergraft, Locked and Loaded with the good Representative Tony Locke from Casper. There's a whole bunch more coming on the Independence Network. Also, don't forget to check out the articles section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics Live. If you want to call into the studio and be part of the program, the phone number is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics Live. Also, if you're watching on the Ditto Cam, the number to the studio is right here in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. So anyway, Open Line Friday, welcome back to the program. Now, switching to a little bit of national news for a minute, the Intel Committee has pivoted after Mike Johnson removes a pro-Ukraine, pro-deep state chairman, and absolutely rightly so. And I quote, Speaker Mike Johnson on Thursday named a new chairman and new lawmakers to the House Intelligence Committee after President-elect Donald Trump had concerns about the former pro-Ukraine, pro-surveillance chairman. Johnson, as Speaker, has the sole discretion to appoint the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, which is a select committee. Johnson tapped Representative Rick Crawford to be the chairman and also named Representative Ann Wagner, Ben Klein, Greg Steube, Claudia Tenney, Bill Fallon to the select committee. Crawford is in his 8th term. He said in a written statement, as chairman, I will aggressively uphold our mandate to provide credible and robust oversight of the intelligence community's funding and activities. Without aggressive oversight and vigorous protections of Americans' Fourth Amendment rights, the IC is prone to give into mission creep and skirt U.S. laws. In all our work, I pledge to preserve Americans' constitutional rights, even as we work to support the IC in doing everything required to collect indispensable information from our foreign adversaries. This is a super important committee because, as all of us are probably very aware, the intelligence community has been violating just about every American's constitutional rights for a very long time. And if they're not overtly doing so, they're doing it covertly. Remember, it was over the 50 experts in the intelligence community that signed a letter saying the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. So whether they're doing it explicitly in arresting anybody who was around Washington, D.C. on January 6th of 2021, or if they are just trying to influence social media companies to take down your posts, they're violating Americans' rights. So it's a good job, Mike Johnson. I'm fully in support of it. And as it relates to the United States House of Representatives, yesterday I did an excellent interview with United States Representative Harriet Hageman. She has a couple of different bills that are being that she's introduced into the U.S. House, one of which is a bill to protect your First Amendment rights and allow you to sue U.S. government officials if they cause your First Amendment rights to be violated. So those people that started the whole Facebook, Twitter censorship thing, if you're one of those people, well, this bill would have allowed you to sue and get judicial relief on whatever was done to you. So it's an incredibly important bill. And she's also got another bill on coal. It's a great interview. And that's going to be published tomorrow on Weekend Update on the Cowboy State Politics podcast. Make sure that you don't miss it. It really is a good episode. Now, as it relates to upcoming stuff on the program, over the weekend, I'm going to be traveling. I've got another engagement I have to be at. So there won't be any Cowboy State Politics Live Tuesday or Wednesday, and we'll return on Thursday for the live broadcast. However, on the podcast, we still will have an episode of Weekend Update and also on the Monday and Wednesday episode. So I have a long weekend worth of work ahead of me. So the podcast, still going to have episodes, but Cowboy State Politics Live, unfortunately, I'm incapable of being in two places at once, so we won't have a program Tuesday and Wednesday, and we'll return on Thursday. So that kind of gives you a roadmap of what's happening on the Cowboy State Politics, across the Cowboy State Politics platform. So anyway, it's Open Line Friday here on Cowboy State Politics Live. The phone number, 307-374-8989. One of the other bills that was up in the House of Representatives yesterday, let me just go through my stack of stuff here. Man, it's way down there. Anyway, is the What is a Woman Act. This has been a highly, highly watched piece of legislation since it was first introduced by then Representative Jeanette Ward. And I have talked to so many elected representatives, both senators and representatives, that said this is the number one issue that was talked about on the campaign trail, and rightfully so. And here's the ridiculous part of it, that some people are unable, because of political reasons. I shouldn't say unable. I should say unwilling to define what exactly a woman is and what a man is. Well, the bill that was brought to the House floor, and this is a fascinating exchange that took place on the House floor, because for most of us, it seems pretty obvious what a man and what a woman is. Every single person that is walking the face of the planet had a mother, and they also had a father. So it's pretty clear that we know what a woman is and what a man is, and that we can't define that in law is absolutely ridiculous. A lot of the arguments on the floor was saying, well, this is going to allow people to go into my body and try to determine if I have eggs. And it's absolutely ridiculous. The only thing the bill is doing is defining what a man and what a woman is. That's it. Legislatures across the country further define terms all of the time, because
2 + 2 is 4, not 5 if you want it to be 5. And this is not to be discriminatory. This is to stand up for language. Words mean things.
Words do mean things. And when you're writing law, they absolutely mean things. The words man and woman appear in Wyoming statutes over 200 times. And so it is absolutely bizarre, first of all, that we have a controversy over what a man and what a woman is. But secondly, it is increasingly idiotic that we absolutely have to define them. But because we have political actors in our society, those definitions are necessary. Now, the more interesting discussion came in opposition to this bill. Now, as we all know, the majority of people in Wyoming politics claim to be Republican, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are. Enter Alyssa Campbell. Oh, man. I'm going to have so much fun with her. She claims to be a Republican, but I think it might be kind of a problem if you claim to be a Republican and you say stupid stuff like this.
As we have seen, it's not just a biological issue anymore. It is far more complex than that. You can have an individual who biologically has the reproductive parts of a female. Chromosomally is male. Hormonally is male. And so now we're going to tell this male person that because you have the reproductive parts of a female, you are mandated by the state to use a female breast.
Okay, all right, that's enough of that. So did you hear what she said? That there are people that have the biological parts of a female, but chromosomally, they're male. Okay, first of all, this is a complete genetic aberration. This is not the majority. It's not even anywhere close to the majority. And as it relates to that, this is a very uncomfortable statistic for a lot of people to even talk about. But compare the actual cases of gender dysphoria, and that is, a recognized psychological condition, and maybe it's partly physical too. But anyway, people who are born a man, for instance, but believe that they're a woman. That is a diagnosable psychological condition. But the numbers of that mirror another condition with a very, 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 very low amount of people. Now, TV makes it seem a little bit different, but the actual number of people with multiple personality disorder, or I think they call it identity dissociative disorder now, is an extraordinarily low number. But if you compare the identity dissociative disorder to gender dysphoria, actual, diagnosed cases, the two numbers pretty much mirror each other. So the actual cases of gender dysphoria, extraordinarily low. And what Alyssa Campbell is talking about there, where you have actual genetic mutations where, maybe you were born, with the physical characteristics of a man, but, hormonally, I don't even know how low those statistics are. But the problem here is that we are taking statistical aberrations, genetic mutations, genetic abnormalities, and we're trying to normalize those to everybody. That's not how we write law. We don't write law for the exception. The exception does not prove the rule. And in this case, when you have one out of probably 500,000 or 1 million people, that's not why we write law. Now, here's the second part of what Alyssa Campbell had to say. This one also crazy. Let's see here. I believe it's this one.
I think the black and white definition served us well decades, hundreds of years ago, right, when most of these statutes first came on. We now have a better understanding of the complexity that is a human. And it's not just biology.
We now have a better understanding of the complexity of what is a woman. That, maybe these definitions worked for the, thousands of years before. But we have a better understanding now of what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a man. This is patently ridiculous. That we have known since the dawn of human beings what a man and what a woman is. We have known which one of those sexes can give birth to a human being, and that is a woman. But this just shows you the radicals that claim to be Republican and get elected in the Wyoming legislature. Make no mistake, Alyssa Campbell is absolutely not a Republican. And the reason for it is, by her own admission, there were only a few people that voted against the What is a Woman Act. Alyssa Campbell, Julie Jarvis were a couple of the Republicans. Ivan Posey voted against it. Pretty much all the Democrats voted against it. And then 50 of their colleagues, 50, voted in favor of the What is a Woman Act. There are a number of people in the House of Representatives that absolutely represent the extreme fringe in Wyoming politics. And two examples of those is Julie Jarvis and Alyssa Campbell. And it's not just me saying it. They said it themselves. That it's not black and white anymore. We know that it's far more complex to determine what a man and what a woman is. Absolutely 100% bizarre. And it's fortunately they're in the extreme minority, so there's really no reason, to expect that bill is going to have any trouble in the House of Representatives. And I think that even the liberal Republicans know that this is the number one campaign issue. However, they are evidently unaware that these statements on the very first day of Committee of the Whole are going to be used against them repeatedly. Throughout the session, throughout next session, and throughout the next campaign. Because I think when it becomes obvious to Wyoming citizens who is actually capable of defining what a man and what a woman is, it's going to be very clear who doesn't need to be in the House of Representatives. Now, that's not to say that there aren't, other contributions. Politics makes strange bedfellows. For example, yesterday I talked to Democrat Carly Provenza for a little bit about corner crossing. That's a bill that's going to it might come up. Who knows? But I think that that's a far more complex issue than any one bill, and I think it deserves some conversation. So even though I am Wyoming's conservative voice, I still talk to Democrats. I would love to have and I'm going to try really hard to get Carly on the program so that we can talk to her about this corner crossing business and other matters. Similarly, Mike Yin, even though I disagree with him on a lot of different things, he and I are pretty much in lockstep on the Convention of States. So just because we staunchly disagree with the stance of Alyssa Campbell and Julie Jarvis on the What is a Woman Act, that doesn't mean that there aren't other contributions. However, the statements on the floor yesterday are going to continue to haunt those two representatives, as they rightly should. I mean, you can't make crazy statements on the floor of the House and expect them not to come back and bite you, especially if you claim to be a Republican. When we come back from the program, we're going to talk about some of the plans of the Biden administration officials when they leave office. We'll do that after the break. Back in a minute. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the Independence Network. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Cowboy State Politics is sponsored by FreedomGoldUSA.com. They are the working man's gold company. The economy is in turmoil. The stock market pretty much is out of control, and you never know what's going to happen with your finances or your income. One way that you can shore up everything is by investing in gold and silver. Go to freedomgoldusa.com/David for a free interview to discuss your options and find out if gold or silver is right for you. One more time, that's freedomgoldusa.com/David. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, pretty much anywhere. Almost as if I'm omnipresent. Doing what I was born to do each and every day with talent given to me by God himself. That's right, my friends. It's Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics Live. The phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989 if you want to be part of the program. 307-374-8989. So before the break, I was telling you that, the people in the Biden administration, they're soon to be out of a job. And so they've had to be making plans. And wouldn't you know, it's some of the plans are more ridiculous than others. The good president thinks he's just going to have a milkshake. And I quote from Washington and the New York Post. From New York anyway. Biden orders milkshakes in a bizarre behind-the-scenes video of the final days of the White House. And you've got to see this video. Biden is just wandering around the White House talking to employees. Now, I imagine that the last full day as president of the United States is an emotional one. You've been the most powerful man in the world for 4 years, and now it's the last day in office. Well, the campaign, or not the campaign, the administration put out a strange video of Biden just walking around talking to people. Now, the Biden, who is 82, was shown shaking hands, asking for milkshakes twice. In one instance, he's being told he'd have to wait for the blended confection to be prepared. Quote, "I'm going to miss you. I just came down here to say hi. And by the way, can you make me a milkshake?" The leader of the free world asked a staffer at the Navy mess hall on the floor below the Oval Office. "Yeah, just give me like 5 minutes," the male staffer said. In another clip, a female mess employee said to the president, "A chocolate milkshake? You want one? I'm on it, sir." Biden joined advisor Amos Hochstein, and they proceeded to walk down to the executive grounds with the chocolate syrup-lined ice cream sundae glass. It's absolutely ridiculous. Let's see. I've got a soundbite of it. Biden milkshake. Maybe I've got it here. Here we go. Take a listen to this.
How's this promotion working?
Oh, it's good. It's good. I think this is up there, but it's good.
We miss you.
Oh, thank you.
Just came out to say hi.
Thank
By the way, can you make me a milkshake?
Yeah, just give me like 5 minutes.
All right.
Is that okay?
That's good. Absolutely.
Yeah, anyway. So it's good that President Joe Biden is, realizing that his last day in office is coming pretty close. But his other counterpart, the good vice president, Kamala Harris, she's decided that she's going to write a book. I can't imagine that thing would be, you could be able to read that thing, given her predilection for, word salad and not being able to fill complete sentences. Doubt it won't be Kamala Harris that's writing it. But anyway, the Vice President Harris, she said she's going to write a book. She's poised to land the biggest book deal of any vice president in history. Keith Urban, the president and co-founder of the literary agency Javelin, told NBC News. Her next campaign will likely include running for governor of California and again for president in 2028. The real question isn't the advance, it's whether the book can redefine her for 2028. A Harris confidant says the vice president owes the American people a book. I think it's more likely that the vice president thinks the country owes her the money, the proceeds from writing a book. Not that anybody is going to buy it, because I'm pretty sure that you couldn't read it. Anyway, absolutely. Another guy who's pretty happy that he, is going to have Trump to go after again is Jim Acosta. Remember him? He was the so-called journalist that went after President Trump at every turn. Well, he is saying that the press is not really the enemy of the people. Now, of course, he's gearing up to ask President Trump, if he believes the press is the enemy of the people, and to completely badger him at every turn. But my guess is probably Jim Acosta is not going to be given press credentials from the White House. However, on Thursday, CNN anchor Jim Acosta from CNN, no, this is from Breitbart, opined that freedom of the press was not just important to democracy. He said, it is democracy. Here is what that idiot Jim Acosta had to say about the free press.
This morning, I want to take a moment to talk about something President Biden said in this country. I would add that's only if we, the people, let that happen. Journalists exist to seek the truth, to tell people stories, to lift up voices that may not be heard otherwise, to shine a light on injustice, and to hold the powerful accountable. We are not the enemy of the people. We are the defenders of them. Walter Cronkite once said, freedom of the press is not just important to democracy, it is democracy.
It is democracy. Jim Acosta is democracy incarnate. Well, this is also Jim Acosta. Now, remember, he was like the number one opponent of President Trump from the press pool. And he claims to be a journalist. And remember what the definition of journalism is, to report the facts, to bring people news. Now, it's okay to be an opinion person like myself, but you need to make it clear that it is opinion and what it is not. On this program, I make it pretty clear when what I'm doing is journalism and when it's not. Earlier on in the broadcast, I mentioned the investigation I did into the University of Wyoming. I had an undercover journalist in there to videotape the whole thing, recorded some really shocking stuff. That was journalism. Most of the time, what we do on Cowboy State Politics is straight opinion. But, it is opinion that is documented to be almost always right 98.97% of the time. Unlike Jim Acosta. Here is another example of what he plans, I'm sure he's trying to plan, to do to President Trump. Anybody remember this?
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to challenge you on one of the statements that you made in the tail end of the campaign.
Oh, hold on. And just pay attention to Trump's responses. This is classic President Trump. And by the way, I am so glad that he's back in office. I have missed him. I've missed how he responds to these idiots in the press, these so-called journalists. Anyway, listen to this.
In the midterms.
Here we go.
If you don't mind, Mr. President, that this caravan was an invasion. As you know, Mr. President,
I consider it to be an invasion.
As you know, Mr. President, the caravan was not an invasion. It's a group of migrants moving up from Central America towards the border with the U.S.
Thank you for telling me that.
Why did you characterize it as such?
Because I consider it an invasion. You and I have a difference of opinion.
But do you think that you demonized immigrants in this election
to try to keep them? I want them to come into the country, but they have to come in legally. They have to come in, Jim, through a process. I want it to be a process, and I want people to come in, and we need the people.
Your campaign.
Wait. You know why we need the people, don't you? Because we have hundreds of companies moving in. We need the people.
Okay. Your campaign had an ad showing.
Okay, that's enough, Jim Acosta. This guy, his only motivation in the White House is to try to make his own political point, which, of course, is not the role of a journalist. But there again, nobody is ever going to accuse Jim Acosta of being a journalist anyway. So, he's thinking that he's going to get back to the White House, and God help us if he does. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left in the program. Let's go ahead and take our last break. And when we come back, I'm going to tell you about Doug Burgum and how he is laying out the case for dependable coal, which is also one of the main topics that I talked to U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman about. But we'll do that after the break. Christmas is over, and all of the fun holiday cheer has been had. And what are we all left with? Frigid Wyoming weather. Below freezing temperatures that you still have to go out in. That's right, you do have to go back to work at one point or another. And not to scare you, but think about this. Every single morning, you get to scrape the ice off of your windshield. Now, while I can't do anything with that, I can make sure that your feet stay nice and toasty warm while you're doing it. All you have to do is order a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. And to get you a pair of them, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day.
Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network, the most listened to political program in the entire state of Wyoming. Over 300,000 downloads and counting. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, Open Line Friday. If you want to be part of the show, the phone number is 307-374-8989. Go ahead and give me a call. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times during the broadcast that yesterday I interviewed U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. That interview is going to be released on the podcast tomorrow during Weekend Update. It's a fantastic interview. You definitely don't want to miss it. She talks about a number of things, that free speech and coal, and how the Biden administration has been trying to destroy Wyoming's coal industry. Well, fortunately, Donald Trump has hired Doug Burgum, the soon-to-be former North Dakota governor, to be the Department of Interior Secretary to replace Tracy Stone Manning, the radical leftist installed in the Department of Interior by the Biden administration. It's been Tracy Stone Manning that's been behind the Rock Springs RMP plan and the Buffalo RMP plan. Now, and Harriet points out that the Buffalo RMP plan has not received nearly as much press as the other one, but it could be far more significant. Certainly it is for the country, because it will ban coal mining in the Powder River Basin beginning in 2041. But one of the important points that Harriet points out is that coal companies don't start and stop coal mining on a dime. They have to plan years in advance. And if you've ever been around Gillette and seen any of the coal mines, those things don't just crop up overnight. So because of Tracy Stone Manning's edict, and the edict coming from the Biden administration, there are already coal mines that are unable to get financing simply because, lenders will look at it and say, well, look, you can't mine coal past 2041, so, why should we give you any money? Fortunately, we have Doug Burgum. From Breitbart News, and I quote, Governor Doug Burgum, President-elect Donald Trump's nominee for Secretary of the Interior, detailed why dependable coal energy is a national security issue during his confirmation hearing before the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. Burgum's comments on Thursday came in response to Jim Justice, who emphasized his concerns about the potential for an electricity crisis, especially as permitting has gotten totally outrageous. Quote, we are in an energy crisis in our country, and the first place is actually related to electricity, Burgum said. Electricity is at the brink. Our grid is at a point that it could go completely unstable. We could be just months away from having skyrocketing prices for Americans. Burgum then noted the need for electricity in the artificial intelligence arms race, underscoring that wind and solar alone cannot propel the United States to victory. Here is what Governor Doug Burgum said during his confirmation hearing.
We are in an energy crisis in our country, and the first place is actually related to electricity. Electricity is at the brink. Our grid is at a point where it could go completely unstable. We could be just months away from having skyrocketing prices for Americans. And of course, as we talked about in the AI arms race, we need electricity for manufacturing, and AI is manufacturing intelligence. And if we don't manufacture more intelligence than our adversaries, it affects every job, every company, and every industry. You understand this, and we've got to get to work. The permitting right now in some of the queues in FERC for electricity, it's 7 years or longer. And it's a completely, that queue in FERC is 95% intermittent sources and only 5% baseload. We need baseload to be able to allow the renewables to be part of the system. We've got to have the balance between those two, or the grid, which is like a giant machine, just doesn't work. And so we've got to get to work. And permitting reform and speeding permitting. Right now, we've stacked the deck where we are creating roadblocks for people that want.
That's probably enough. I mean, he goes on to fully explain it, but the truth is that our coal industry is essential to national security, and it is electricity that runs everything, even down to this very program. We are dead in the water without electricity, and we're dead in the water without Wyoming coal, which is why we have to get rid of these activists and these ideologues in the United States government, like Tracy Stone Manning. And I mean, there's a whole long list of them. But fortunately, President Trump nominated Doug Burgum to be the Secretary of the Interior, simply because we have to get a handle on all of these executive orders. And that's one of the things that Harriet and I talk about, the ridiculousness of executive orders. And it is a fascinating interview, and it's one that you definitely don't want to miss, my friends. It's probably one of the better interviews I've done with Harriet Hageman, but that'll be tomorrow on Weekend Update. One more time to give you a rundown of what the schedule is. I'll be traveling the first part of next week, so we won't have Cowboy State Politics live until Thursday. We'll have program Thursday and Friday, and then the following week we'll be back full-time. The podcast, on the other hand, I'll have Harriet's interview on Saturday, and then we'll have an episode Monday and also an episode Wednesday. I'm going to give you a preview of different bills that are coming, and of course, we won't have any current sound bites until I return. But no doubt, if yesterday was any indication, there's going to be a whole bunch of ridiculous stuff that's been being said on the floor of the House of Representatives. And as I pointed out, it's pretty clear who's a Republican and who's not, who's a conservative and who just claim to be Republican so that they can get elected. And I gave you two indications of those today, Alyssa Campbell and Julie Jarvis. They voted with the Democrats on the What is a Woman Act. I went to high school with Julie Jarvis, and I am shocked that she couldn't even vote for a bill that defined what a woman is. Instead, went to ridiculous extremes to try to tell her colleagues not to vote for. But it's absolutely ridiculous. But there's way more fun to come. Today is only day 5 of the Wyoming legislature. This morning in the Judiciary Committee was the Repeal Gun-Free Zones bill. I cannot wait to hear how that committee hearing went. And it's that bill is going to sail through no problem. The question is, what is the Senate going to do with it? That's the big question mark this legislative session. You really don't have to wonder what the House of Representatives are going to do. It's run by conservatives. It is the Senate who, there's a conservative president of the Senate, but it is not conservatives who run the committees. So anyway, big question marks. We don't know a lot, but pretty soon it's all going to start to coalesce, and we'll know exactly how this legislative session is going to go. Well, from the depths of the Middle Swamp in Wyoming's capital of Cheyenne, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. Have a good weekend, my friends.